former boss of Barclays, who was ousted from the bank over his links to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, will seek to clear his name in court this week. Jes Staley was forced out in November 2021 after UK regulators ruled he had failed to accurately disclose the nature and length of his relationship with Epstein to the Barclays board. The episode cost Mr. Staley, a man with a glittering and rewarding career in investment banking, £18 million in pay and bonuses, and, more importantly, his reputation. Mr. Staley is seeking to overturn a decision by the Financial Conduct Authority in 2023 banning him from holding a senior position in financial services. Jes Staley had been disciplined by regulators in 2018 over his attempts to unmask a whistleblower he felt was unfairly trying to smear a colleague. But the crucial blow to his position at Barclays was his insistence that his relationship with Epstein was not close and had ended before he took up the top job at the UK bank. A cache of emails released by his former employer J.P. Morgan suggested the relationship was in fact very close. Email exchanges described time spent together at Mr. Epstein's properties in New York and on his private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands. A now infamous email thread shows Mr. Staley remarking to Epstein, "That was fun, say hi to Snow White." Epstein replies, "What character would you like next?" To which Mr. Staley replies, "Beauty and the Beast." There are also allegations that he and Epstein stayed in contact indirectly after he took the Barclays job. Mr. Staley's lawyers insist that any such moves were initiated by Epstein, and Mr. Staley made no attempt to contact Epstein. All of this will be aired in a court that will call former regulators and executives as witnesses, and many have questioned why Mr. Staley, who is now 68 and extremely wealthy, would want this publicity all over again. Jes Staley is a tough and fiercely proud man. He enjoyed a very successful career on Wall Street, and many thought he was destined to take over at the helm of his old employer J.P. Morgan, the biggest investment bank in the world. Internally, he was popular with most of his banking colleagues. His ill-fated attempt to unmask a whistleblower he thought was smearing an old colleague was seen by some, but not all, as evidence of fierce loyalty to his own troops. That willingness to go into battle will be on show in the coming days, but seems unlikely to restore his reputation or future position to the one he enjoyed before he was shown the door at Barclays. YouTuber Asmita Patel's mission was to make India trade. The wildly popular financial influencer called herself the she-wolf of the stock market. Her take on the Hollywood film The Wolf of Wall Street. At last count, she had clocked upwards of 500,000 subscribers on YouTube and hundreds of thousands on Instagram. Fees for her stock trading courses ran into thousands of rupees. Last month, the market regulator Securities and Exchange Board of India, SEBI, put a spanner in the works. It barred her and 6 others from trading, alleging she was selling illegal stock tips disguised as investor education and making millions of rupees in the bargain. The regulator's crackdown on Patel is its latest attempt to tighten the noose around social media influencers offering quick money schemes and trading advice disguised as education. India's post-pandemic market boom attracted a wave of new mom-and-pop investors. Online trading accounts grew from merely 36 million in 2019 to more than 150 million last year. Data from the brokerage Zerodha shows. Many of these first-time market entrants relied on social media for trading tips which, in turn, birthed a new breed of self-styled investment gurus or financial influencers like Ms. Patel, promising quick money. With only 950 registered investment advisors and 1,400 financial advisors in the country, these influencers quickly filled the void, amassing hundreds of thousands of subscribers and followers. Most operated without regulatory registration, blurring the line between investment advice and stock market education. This prompted SEBI to crack down, banning at least a dozen influencers, including a Bollywood actor, from offering trading advice. The regulator has also barred brokerages and market players from partnering with influencers who peddle illegal stock tips or make misleading return claims. SEBI has also laid down strict guidelines for educators, effectively barring them from offering real-time trading tips or using live market data for educational purposes. The regulator found Ms. Patel and her husband, Jitesh, directing students and investors to trade specific stocks through their advisory firm. She allegedly used private Telegram channels, Zoom calls, and courses to sell tips without mandatory registration. SEBI acted in Ms. Patel's case after 42 participants complained of trading losses and demanded compensation. It is now moving to seize millions of rupees that Patel and her associates earned from course fees between 2021 and 2024. As markets correct, the economy slows and regulators crack down, other influencers face a credibility test. Thousands of angry investors have recently accused high-profile influencers of faking their success to sell trading courses and earn millions in brokerage referrals. SEBI's order in Ms. Patel's case too revealed she made just over $13,700, £10,800, as trading profits in the past 5 years, but earned more than $11.4 million, £9 million, by selling courses. Ms. Patel didn't respond to the BBC's request for comment. While SEBI's drive to protect small investors is well-intentioned, its recent regulatory actions have drawn criticism for being delayed and lacking clarity. The regulator has been both a selective and reluctant regulator, Sucheta Dalal, veteran financial journalist and author, told the BBC. It should have acted a few years ago when trading sites started paying influencers to promote their products. Now this phenomenon has become too big. Sumit Agrawal, a former officer with SEBI, says the regulator singled out a few as an example instead of enforcing a clear, comprehensive policy. Curbing unregulated stock tips is necessary, but requiring trading schools to use 3-month-old data for educational purposes and not teaching practical experience of trading strategies on live market crosses into overregulation, he says. Manish Singh, a chartered accountant and YouTuber with 500,000 followers, makes market analysis videos. He says SEBI's new rules have created confusion over what's allowed. Even genuine content creators who are trying to guide people in the right direction will lose subscribers, and the monetary incentive of brand deals as confidence to work with creators is shaken, Singh told the BBC.
Last night's show featured a bizarre James Bond tribute while failing to duly honor visionary director David Lynch. That choice spoke to the award's profound identity crisis. Early on in Sunday's 3 3/4-hour Academy Awards ceremony, there was a tribute to the James Bond franchise, consisting of a Broadway dance routine from Margaret Qualley and 3 classic theme songs belted out by Lisa, Doja Cat, and Ray. It was a strange segment, not just because no Bond films have been released in the past 3 years, but because the series' longtime custodians, Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson, have just handed over control of their family business to Amazon. Considering that so many of the evening's speeches praised cinema and the cinema-going experience, it was embarrassing that the Academy 007 tribute coincided with the selling of one of cinema's most spectacular, big-screen-worthy assets to a streaming service. Wouldn't a tribute to the late David Lynch have been more apposite? Lynch, who died in January, is regarded as one of modern American film's most singular visionaries, and he was a 4-time Oscar nominee and an honorary Oscar winner to boot. Yet he merited just a few seconds in the in memoriam montage. Later in the ceremony, though, there was time for a tribute to the late Quincy Jones, who is undoubtedly a legendary figure but more in the music world than film. This sequence consisted of Queen Latifah's performance of Ease On Down the Road, a song from The Wiz, 1978, which was produced but not written by Jones. With all due respect, do any film fans believe that The Wiz merits more attention than such Lynch masterpieces as The Elephant Man, Blue Velvet, and Mulholland Drive? Presumably the producers of the Oscars do, and that could be why the institution has such a profound identity crisis. Glance at the list of winners, and you'll see that this was probably the most radical celebration of innovative, low-budget cinema in Oscar history. And yet the cheesy and cliched ceremony is lagging decades behind the tastes of its voters. The biggest winners of the night were Anora and The Brutalist, 2 independent films made by auteurs with big ideas and tiny budgets. Last year we had Barbenheimer. This year we had Brutanora, The Anoralist. Maybe not. Brady Corbett's defiantly serious period drama, The Brutalist, won the Oscars for score, cinematography, and leading actor. Adrian Brody's rambling speech really should have had an interval like the film itself. But the voters' favorite was Anora. Sean Baker's heart-tugging screwball tragicomedy won the Oscar for Best Picture as well as for Director, Original Screenplay, and Editor. Quite a haul for Baker, a boundary-pushing low-budget filmmaker who did all 3 jobs himself. The star of Honora, Mikey Madison, also won the Best Actress prize, making this an historic occasion in which two different Oscar acceptance speeches paid tribute to the sex worker community. The 25-year-old definitely deserved the Academy Award for her explosively dynamic yet sensitive performance, but she is almost a newcomer, so it was hard not to feel sorry for her closest rival, Demi Moore. In The Substance, Moore plays a middle-aged Hollywood actress who is usurped by her fresh-faced young doppelganger. So when Madison took to the stage to her accept her Oscar and Moore was left in her seat, there was a cruel and eerie sense that the plot of The Substance was unfolding in real life. Till The Substance won for makeup and hairstyling, not bad going for a delirious body horror film from a French director. Jacques Audiard's trans gangster musical Emilia Perez won Best Supporting Actress, Zoe Saldana, and Best Song. And Walter Salles' political yet personal Brazilian drama, I'm Still Here, won Best International Film. There were technical awards for Dune, Part 2 and Wicked, and an adapted screenplay prize for Conclave, but in most of the high-profile categories, this was an Oscars for the underdogs, an evening when left-field artists like Baker won awards and then spoke about the value of independent filmmaking and going to see films in cinemas. Kieran Culkin won Best Supporting Actor for A Real Pain, as expected, and he swore in his acceptance speech, as expected. The Best Animated Feature Film was Flow, a cartoon made in Latvia using free open-source software. And the Best Documentary Feature was No Other Land, a documentary set on the occupied West Bank and made by an Israeli/Palestinian collective which doesn't even have a US distributor. A few years ago, a film like Flow could never have toppled a Disney Pixar cartoon as popular as Inside Out 2, but the Academy's drive to bring in a younger, more diverse set of voters is obviously having an effect. If only the show had been affected, too. Instead, the proceedings could easily have been mistaken for a 1970s television variety show. The host was Conan O'Brien, following 2 years when Jimmy Kimmel was Master of Ceremonies, so that's 3 years in a row when the event took its self-satisfied tone from a late-night talk show host delivering late-night talk show wisecracks. Bryan wasn't unfunny exactly, and he made the odd sharply political comment, but essentially it was yet another evening in which a bored man in a bow tie made snide roast-style jibes about films that deserve better. The Oscars are clearly in their safe pair of hands era when, in the wake of the notorious La La Land/Moonlight envelope mix-up, and Will Smith's slapping of Chris Rock, the producers are intent on making everything as middle-of-the-road and predictable as possible. The show was slick and glitzy enough, with nothing actively obnoxious about it except for the insulting practice of cutting off the winners' speeches while making time for O'Brien's skits. But the format is getting so tired that it's no longer fit for purpose. You don't have to take my word for it. If you're still enjoying the show, you have something called Stockholm Syndrome, said O'Brien after about 3 hours. And if a show's host is joking about how much of an endurance test it is, then a major shakeup is required. What the ceremony needs now is even a fraction of the invention, daring, and energy which are evident in the films it's honoring. Oscar winners have changed. Now it's time for Oscar night to change too.
As someone who feels a cold, but is reluctant to constantly turn up the thermostat, a hot water bottle and a thick fleece are two of my closest friends. And as relentless winter storms sweep the east coast of the US and Canada, and other countries across the globe are trawling to what feels like a very long winter, you might also be wondering, what is the best indoor temperature for your health and comfort? The answer, it turns out, is not straightforward. In the 1860s, German physician Karl Wunderlich took the temperatures of around 25,000 people and found that the average was 37 C, 98.6 F. This figure has been widely accepted ever since. However, new data suggests that this isn't strictly true. Body temperature can vary between individuals, with modern research suggesting that gender, metabolism, hormones, activity, age, and menstruation all have an influence. So, with such variations to consider, is there an optimum temperature at which to keep your home? For countries with temperate or colder climates, guidance from the World Health Organization states that a room temperature of 18 C, 64.4 F, is safe enough to protect us from the harmful effects of cold. Being in a cold, damp, or drafty environment has negative physical and mental health consequences, from worsening asthma and increased risk of heart disease to anxiety and depression. We recognize healthy homes are one of the key building blocks for good health. So that means homes that are accessible, safe, comfortable, and warm help to protect our health and support our communities to be healthy and resilient, says Rebecca Wilson, Senior Public Health Specialist at Public Health Wales in the UK, an organization which advocates for improving links between homes and health. The results of Public Health Wales's 2022 and 2023 winter surveys found that people were increasingly experiencing stress or anxiety in the 3 months leading up to winter due to rising heating costs, a jump from 57.2% to 66.5%. When the cold set in, more people set their thermostats to lower temperatures at home and chose to heat specific rooms rather than the whole house, and instead turned to hot water bottles or blankets to stay warm. We know that all people who live in cold homes or face frugal poverty are affected, but the research does show that there are certain population groups such as older people, children, and people with disabilities and health conditions who might be more impacted, says Wilson. Read more about how cold homes can affect health. Equally, overheating is also a health risk for those living in warmer climates, with an increased likelihood of heat exhaustion and heat stroke as the body desperately tries to cool itself, in turn putting stress on the heart and kidneys. Overheating can also exacerbate existing health conditions and negatively impact mental health, with links found to an increased suicide risk. It's a bleak picture. Research has shown a global link between both cold and heat exposure mortality over the 21st century, with experts calling for more public awareness of non-optimal temperatures as a health risk. This is becoming an increasing problem due to climate change and a longer duration and intensity of extreme weather events. Exposure factors like occupation and socioeconomic status can play a role. Outdoor manual workers often work through extreme temperatures, and people living in poor urban or rural areas may be subject to low-quality, drafty housing, or in hot weather, have less access to cooling like air conditioning. Babies, young children, and elderly people are also particularly vulnerable as they are less able to thermoregulate, meaning they are less able to maintain a core body temperature by balancing heat generation with heat loss. For example, according to Lullaby Trust in the UK, the recommended room temperature for babies is slightly lower than average, at 16-20C, 60-68F. If babies overheat, there is a risk of sudden infant death syndrome. So the charity advises using a thermometer to test the temperature of the room, but also check your baby by feeling the back of their neck and chest to see if they are hot or sweaty.
The UK data watchdog has launched what it calls a major investigation into TikTok's use of children's personal information. The Information Commissioner's Office, ICO, will inspect the way in which the social media platform uses the data of 13 to 17-year-olds to recommend further content to them. John Edwards, the Information Commissioner, said it would look at whether TikTok's data collection practices could lead to children experiencing harms, such as data being leaked or spending more time than is healthy on the platform. TikTok told the BBC its recommender systems operated under strict and comprehensive measures that protect the privacy and safety of teens. It added that the platform also has robust restrictions on the content allowed in teens' feeds. Mr. Edwards said TikTok's algorithm feeds on personal data gleaned from user profiles, preferences, links clicked, and how long they spend watching a particular video, making it subject to UK rules. In addition to the probe into TikTok, the ICO is also checking the age verification processes of Reddit and Imgur, an image-sharing platform. The investigation will look into whether the companies are complying with both the UK's data protection laws and the Children's Code. The code is set to design principles for online platforms aimed at protecting children in the UK. Platforms which collect UK children's user data must minimize the amount they gather and take extra care when processing it. The ICO's investigations into Reddit and Imgur will focus on how the platforms check the ages of their users and their enforcement of age checks. Ofcom said in October Reddit had overtaken X as the UK's fifth most popular platform. Imgur, meanwhile, says on its website that it reaches more than 250 million people a month. However, it does not state in which countries their users are based, so there is no figure for the number of people using it in the UK. I don't want to prejudge how we might look at the Imgur and Reddit matters, but if there are age limits for accessing services, then the platforms have to enforce those in some ways, the Information Commissioner told the BBC. There are a number of different technologies and techniques that are available, I would say, and the degree of rigor, I think, depends in part upon the kinds of risks, the likelihood that children will be accessing those sites. I guess a baseline would be self-declaration is probably not going to cut it if there is content on the site or services on the site that are unsuitable for children under the age of 13. A Reddit spokesperson told the BBC that 95% of their users are adults, but that they have plans to roll out changes this year that address updates to UK regulations around age assurance. Imager has not responded to the BBC's request for a comment. The investigations do not necessarily mean any of the three platforms have broken the law, but companies which are found to have done so can be punished with enforcement notices and fines. "We are patrolling, and there will be consequences for breaches of the law," said Mr. Edwards. It is not the first time TikTok has faced scrutiny from the ICO. The platform is appealing against an ICO fine of £12.7 million in 2023 for misusing children's data issued in 2023.
U.S. President Donald Trump hit the pause button in February on imposing tariffs against imports from Canada and Mexico, suspending a tit-for-tat trade war in North America for a month by signing last-minute agreements with both U.S. neighbors. That month ends this week, and Trump has said the U.S. will charge 25% tariffs on goods from Canada and Mexico starting on Tuesday. Consumers in all three countries are now bracing for what will happen next. The three trade partners have deeply integrated economies and supply chains, with an estimated $2 billion, £1.6 billion, worth of manufactured goods crossing the borders daily. Trump says he wants to protect American industry, but many economists warn such tariffs could lead to prices rising for consumers in the U.S. That's because the tax is paid by the domestic company importing the goods, who may choose to pass the cost on to customers directly, or to reduce imports, which would mean fewer products available. So what could get more expensive if Trump's tariffs do eventually go ahead? Cars would probably go up in price, by about $3,000 according to TD Economics. That's because parts cross the U.S., Canadian, and Mexican borders multiple times before a vehicle is assembled. As a result of higher taxes paid on the importing of parts to build the cars, it is likely the costs will be passed on to customers. Suffice it to say that disrupting these trends through tariffs would come with significant costs, said Andrew Foran, an economist at TD Economics. He added uninterrupted free trade in the car-making sector had existed for decades, which had led to lower prices for consumers. Popular Mexican beers Modelo and Corona could get more expensive for U.S. customers if the American companies importing them pass on the increased import taxes. However, it's also possible that rather than passing on the cost increase, firms could just import less. Modelo became the #1 beer brand in the U.S. in 2023 and remains in the top spot for now. It's more complex when it comes to spirits. The sector has been largely free of tariffs since the 1990s. Industry bodies from the U.S., Canada, and Mexico issued a joint statement in advance of the tariffs being announced, saying they were deeply concerned. They say that certain brands, such as bourbon, Tennessee whiskey, tequila, and Canadian whiskey, are recognized as distinctive products and can only be produced in their designated countries. So given the production of these drinks cannot simply be moved, supplies might be impacted, leading to price rises. The trade bodies also highlighted that many companies own different spirit brands in all three countries. The U.S. imports about a third of its softwood lumber from Canada each year, and that key building material would be hit by Trump's suggested tariffs. Trump has said the U.S. has more lumber than we ever use. However, the National Association of Home Builders has urged the president to exempt building materials from the proposed tariffs because of their harmful effect on housing affordability. The industry group has serious concerns that the tariffs on lumber could increase the cost of building homes, which are mostly made out of wood in the U.S., and also put off developers building new homes. Consumers end up paying for the tariffs in the form of higher home prices, the NAB said. It's not just lumber from Canada that could be affected by tariffs. There is now a second threat looming for most lumber and timber imports into the U.S., regardless of their country of origin. On March 1, Trump ordered an investigation into whether the U.S. should either place additional tariffs on most lumber and timber imports, regardless of their country of origin, or create incentives to boost domestic production. Findings are due towards the end of the year. Canada is America's largest foreign supplier of crude oil. According to the most recent official trade figures, 61% of oil imported into the U.S. between January and November last year came from Canada. While 25% has been slapped on Canadian goods imported to the U.S., its energy faces a lower 10% tariff. Now, the U.S. doesn't have a shortage of oil, but the type its refineries are designed to process means it depends on so-called heavier, i.e., thicker, crude oil from mostly Canada and some from Mexico. Many refineries need heavier crude oil to maximize flexibility of gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel production, according to the American fuel and petrochemical manufacturers. That means if Canada decided in retaliation to any U.S. tariffs to reduce crude oil exports, that could lead to prices rising at the petrol pumps.